Now we welcome Mr. Dan Perry. He's a world affairs expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. This Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has issued a map showing alternate shipping routes. Do you think that companies are desperate to take this as a green light and actually follow this path? What's your take on Strait of Hormuz?
Well, there's some concern about mines that might have been placed in the strait. So that they're issuing a map, I suppose, can be seen as a helpful sign that they are trying to collaborate in reducing the danger and reopen the strait. I mean, it seems to align with an Iranian understanding that travel should be safe and free through the strait. Of course, we also hear that the Iranians are toying with the notion of a new arrangement whereby they are allowed to charge a bounty for ships going through the strait. Nonetheless, I can't imagine that the United States and the world community would allow such a thing, but that the Iranians, or at least some of them, are talking about it with a straight face, really does suggest that despite the military thrashing that they have absorbed, they somehow believe they have leverage. And so obviously the Strait of Hormuz continues to be a real focus of these talks. And in a way, that has to be conceded as an Iranian success, because the fact that reopening the strait now looks like an achievement shows that they have demonstrated their ability to cause trouble there and have shifted the narrative and the discussion away from the actual casus belli of the war, which was their killing of thousands and tens of thousands of protesters, and the nuclear weapons issue.
So do you think that Iran would be able, or do you think they're considering nationalizing this strait? Do you think, okay, what do you think could happen now?
This is piracy, pure and simple. I don't have a better word for it. When a waterway is entirely within the territory of a country, sure, that country has a right to charge for passage through its territory. That applies to the Suez Canal that goes through Egypt. That applies in various ways because there have been treaties in this regard to the Panama Canal. It does not apply categorically to the Strait of Hormuz, which is an international waterway that is bordered on one side to the north by Iran. Iran has territorial waters, and you cannot enter those territorial waters freely.
Yes.
But the territorial waters do not extend all the way across the waterway. So Iran's notion that it should have some control over it is categorically absurd, and it must not be allowed to stand. And it really would be a casus belli. I sense that the NATO countries, European countries, Asian countries, all sort of treated the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz as, in a twisted way, fair enough, when Iran is being attacked, fine, but that it should continue, and that Iran should have some permanent notion of blocking an international waterway is a casus belli. And I think at that point, if they were serious, then they would find that they have invited war with the entire planet.
Now we welcome back Mr. Dan Perry. He's a world affairs expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Perry, for staying with us. Mr. Perry, what's your take? Do you think that Russia is benefiting from this war, or yes?
Russia's categorically benefiting from this war. First of all, over 60% of Russia's exports, I believe, are energy related, and when the cost of energy goes up, even if only temporarily, then Russia's happy. Indeed, Putin's ability to project some kind of stability to the Russian people, some version of prosperity, despite the authoritarian nature of his regime 20 years ago, depended on high oil prices. So, yeah, clearly they're happy when the world also faces a challenge in a supply of crude oil. Then clearly the effort to limit Russia's exports might be diminished. The world has allowed, even the U.S. has looked the other way with Russian export of oil as long as the price was capped. So any changes in the oil supply in the direction of price going up is going to please them and bring money into their coffers. Beyond that, for the U.S. to attack Iran as they did suggests that big powers can do as they wish. Uh, I don't think the war was illegitimate, given that Iran had killed so many protesters and had been so aggressive towards the Arab world, but with the militias that they have planted in half the countries. But it was America, pursuing a highly independent foreign policy without caring so much about getting, for example, approval from the Security Council. For Russia, that kind of world in which might makes right, and in which the rules-based international order is sort of not that relevant anymore, is precisely what they want. Because they believe that Ukraine, for example, is they're near abroad that they should control. And in that kind of a world, I think we might find Russia becoming expansionist, not only towards Ukraine, but also towards the Baltics and parts of Eastern Europe.
Do you think that, ever since this war started, including, like you mentioned, that U.S. isn't concerned as much as they used to be about Russian benefiting from this, how do you think this has sidelined overall the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, there have been a series of gifts from Donald Trump to Vladimir Putin. Not only the war causing oil prices to spike, which is good news for Russia, but in general, Trump's attitude towards NATO, to weaken the alliance, to project indifference towards the alliance, to even suggest the U.S. might pull out of the alliance that preserved the peace and prosperity in the West and really in the world since World War II. Trump seems to think is no big deal, might be obsolete. This is what caused Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, to rush over to the U.S., where he met with Trump just over the past day in hopes of, diminishing the crisis. And I'm not so sure he succeeded, because in the U.S. right now we hear of the notions of moving troops out of countries and punishing NATO countries that did not join the war. So all these fissures in NATO, again, help Russia. The rise in oil prices certainly helps Russia. And the background to all this is that the U.S. elected president in November 2024, who seems to not necessarily prefer Ukraine to Russia. I mean, he actually has called Zelensky a dictator when Zelensky's fighting a war for democracies against a true dictator in Putin. He has suggested that Ukraine started the war at various times, which is an absurdity. So
Yes.
It's difficult to conceive of a Russian leader, of a leader in Moscow, who has received a greater raft of gifts from a U.S. president since maybe Yalta, when the process began that handed Eastern Europe to the Soviet Union.
With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Perry for joining us and sharing that insight.